Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar. It's how RentACenter stays secure and compliant on AWS of Alert Logic. Just a couple housekeeping before we get started today. There's going to be a question panel on the side. You can submit questions during that time. You can also, we'll have Q&A at the end, and then we'll get started shortly. All right. So first and foremost, the essence of what you're going to receive in today's webinar is we're going to talk about how AWS and Alert Logic help RentACenter basically operationalize the AWS shared responsibility model, where the gaps were on the platform and how Alert Logic helped extend that and meet the customer's responsibility. So today's presenters, first and foremost, I'm Patrick McDowell. I am a partner solutions architect from Amazon Web Services. I'm responsible to help our customers and partners create a truly secure product or service in AWS. I'm happy to be joined by Ryan Holland today, Senior Director of Technology at Alert Logic, as well as Mike Santamaw. From RentACenter. We're very lucky to have a customer here, and Mike is the VP of Information Security. So, as I said, the shared responsibility model is a joint effort on AWS, and by partnering together, we can provide protection from every vantage point. But first, let's talk about why security is traditionally hard, say in your colo or data center. First of all, there's a lack of visibility and low degree of automation. I think everyone who has been in a physical data center or ran their own colo can honestly say they always kind of maybe see a sticky note on a server that says do not touch or do not turn off. You really have no idea what your inventory is. Something has been plugged in for years. It's probably unpatched and no one knows what it does or who owns it or who even put it there. Also, traditional security tools are just boxes, dumb boxes. They require user interface or CLI. There's no centralized management, and APIs don't exist. But in Amazon, that changes everything. You can literally get an inventory of all your compute instances in a single region with a single API call. Essentially, the cloud changes security for the better. So you can use AWS to transform the way you do business by automating security and compliance tasks. By doing that, you're able to reduce your risk, get more out of your precious security resources, and focus on your core business needs. We have some great customer examples right here, some very important customers. FINRA. FINRA is essentially the federal regulator that analyzes every single stock transaction every day. And John Brady, the CISO of FINRA, a regulator of banks, said, we determined that security in AWS is superior to our on-premise data center by several dimensions, including patching, encryption, auditing, logging, entitlements, and compliance. Slack, which I'm addicted to every day, enterprise communications. So maybe this isn't a stock transaction, but often confidential, private information is shared on Slack channels between employees. Security is paramount there to protect private internal communications. And then finally, the CEO of DNA Nexus, Richard Daly, said, with AWS, DNA Nexus enables enterprise worldwide to perform genomic analysis and clinical studies in a secure and compliant environment at scale not previously possible. And DNA Nexus is responsible for, drug trials and privileged patient information. And all of that is stored and run in trials in AWS. So we're really seeing an uptick of security being the reason why customers move to the cloud. Besides customers, Gartner has gotten on the bandwagon that the cloud breeds deeper security controls. Sorry about that. As you can see here by Gartner, CIOs and CISOs need to stop obsessing over cloud security worries. Instead, use their imagination and energy developing new approaches to cloud control. So Alert Logic is one of those partners that has really put forward of using new, getting over the old worries, embracing a cloud method of security. So at AWS, security is our top priority, and that is why we listen closely to our customers to offer both a secure cloud computing environment and innovative security services that satisfies the security and compliance needs of the most risk-sensitive organizations in the world. Today, we protect millions of active customers around the world, and our customers represent diverse industries with a wide range of use cases. I talked about, financial services and healthcare companies, but it's also large enterprises and startups, universities, and government organizations. The scale and global reach of these customers give us broad visibility and deep perspective on cloud security, knowledge which we have rapidly reinvest back into our leading edge infrastructure. And security at AWS starts with our core infrastructure. Our infrastructure is custom built for the cloud and designed to meet the most stringent security requirements in the world. Our infrastructure is monitored 24/7 to ensure confidentiality, integrity, and availability of all our customers' data. And those same security experts who monitor this infrastructure also build and maintain our broad selection of innovative security services like Amazon GuardDuty, which can help you simplify meeting your own security and regulatory requirements. So it doesn't matter how big or small is your customer. You could be a dorm room startup, or you can be a Fortune 100 company. Everyone has the same security controls and personnel protecting them. And to aid in that security and compliance efforts, AWS regularly achieves third-party validation and attestation frameworks, as you can see from this NASCAR-esque slide. We have thousands of global security and compliance requirements that we meet, and that we continually monitor to help you meet your security and compliance standards for finance, retail, healthcare, and beyond. You inherit the latest controls operated by AWS automatically, thus strengthening your own compliance and certification programs, while also receiving access to tools you can reduce your cost and time to run your own specific security assurance requirements. So at AWS, we support security standards to help you meet PCI, HIPAA, FedRAMP, EU Data Protection Directive, FISMA, and many, many more, as you can see from the screen. The important thing to remember is just because AWS has a PCI certification, that does not make your workload PCI compliant. It's a combination of using AWS, using our partners, and you as a customer fulfilling your side of the AWS shared responsibility model. So this is kind of a picture of the cloud. Availability and reliability are one of the main reasons our business has grown as fast as it has. We build our data centers in multiple geographic regions, as well across multiple availability zones within each region to offer maximum resiliency against system outages. So currently, the AWS cloud spans 54 availability zones with 18 geographic regions around the world. And we have pre-announced 12 more availability zones and 4 more entire regions coming in Bahrain, Hong Kong, Sweden, and a second AWS GovCloud region. So we design our data centers with significant excess bandwidth connections, and some of them you can see here. So that is a major disruption occurs. There is sufficient capacity to enable traffic to be load balanced to remaining sites, minimizing customer impact. Not only that, we have started laying our own fiber across the globe and even across the ocean. So we have the highest standards for privacy, and we give you a lot of tools to help that. The simplest security mechanism of the cloud is when you choose a region, you say where to put your data. It never leaves where you say to move. Your data never leaves where you put it. We never move it for you for maintenance reasons or anything at all, because AWS is vigilant about your privacy. Because our customers care deeply about data security, we have a world-class team of experts, as I said before, monitoring systems 24/7 following the sun. With AWS, you could build on the most secure global infrastructure, as I started talking about in the previous slide, knowing you always have your data where you expect it to be, and we give you the ability to encrypt it, move it, and manage your own data retention. We provide tools that allow you to easily encrypt your data, like AWS Key Management Service and AWS Cloud HSM, which Key Management Service, KMS, is now FIPS 140-2 Level 2 validated, and Cloud HSM is FIPS 140-2 Level 3 validated. We also give you the control and visibility you need to help demonstrate that you comply with regional and local data privacy laws and regulations. And the design of our global infrastructure allows you to retain complete control over the regions which your data is physically located, as I was saying before. So if you put your data in Germany, it'll never leave German in our Frankfurt region, as an example. And this helps you meet our data residency requirements. So with that, I get to move it over to Mike to talk about his journey in AWS and his cloud-first approach to security.
Thank you, Patrick. Having a little trouble with the slides here. There we go. For those of you that don't know RentACenter, we're the one of the largest rent-owned retailers in North America. We have about 3,000 brick and mortar locations, along with 1,200 partner locations, where we are inside of another box retailer, say an Ashley Furniture as a financing arm, and we are about 21,000 employees. That is quite a large amount across the U.S., and we're proud of the strong workforce we have here in the U.S. Founded in '86, and I think most notably we grew through acquisition, and you can see on the bottom right here where just a large amount of brands that maybe you haven't associated with RentACenter before. You know, Rim Time for wheels and tires. We have quite a few home good brands here on the side, and we also again that Acceptance Now option for financing inside of these other retailers. Our customer experiences are brick and mortar, like I mentioned, where it's your standard shopping experience, as well as a large e-commerce premise or platform that we maintain, and that financial partnership arm. Our environment is a bit complex, you know, growing through acquisition since '86. We've got a couple traditional data centers with a variety of environments in each. It's not like we have one that's failover for the other. We also have multiple cloud providers, many partner agreements with SaaS providers. Again, I mentioned the e-commerce environments. We also have a mobile platform, and we also have compliance and regulatory scenarios as well, PCI and SOX, which I'm proud to say we have a great handle on with regards to our presence in the cloud with Alert Logic, and as well as our on-prem. We, from a development perspective, we have our traditional development environments. We have a strong DevOps presence, and we have resources both internally with RentACenter in Plano, Texas, as well as external global resources. We are a strong partnership organization, so we love to do great things with great organizations, from all the way from security all the way to development. So our challenge has been from a security perspective, how do we stay in front of all these great avenues that are in front of us? So we look at continually expanding our points of commerce. We want to drive transformational and innovational objectives in the leased ownership sector. We want to be that next evolution of what that lease ownership sector really is for our vertical. And to do that, we need to make sure security is not a hindrance on those innovational needs. I'm sure you've heard time and time again across your career in IT or in whatever industry you're in, I can't get X done because I need to meet the security requirement. We've done a good job at RentACenter of removing the word no. We really want to become that collaborative organization, or that collaborative security team across the organization. But we want to make sure we are also securing our core and addressing those cybersecurity risks. as you think about a DevOps organization, they're made to be flexible and agile. And how do we make it our security controls part of their automated means? AlertLogic allows us to do that. From a staffing perspective, we have a fairly small team. We have a great team that grew up primarily organically inside the organization. They've had a variety of roles and have given them great visibility inside of those roles as well, into the inner workings of the organization that we want to continue to grow and maintain. But we want to make sure that we don't take over their entire life, right? So when I think about our partnership with AlertLogic, it's giving hours back in their day to spend with their families and do right things, because it's unrealistic to think that we can manage a 24/7 information security team. We're going to need strong partnerships, strong strategic partnerships like the one we have with AlertLogic. And again, I mentioned, how do we do right by the organization? I think it's being that silent partner. We want to make sure the security controls are in place, easily consumed, and also just a part of their automated means. So we looked at many options. We looked at how do we build SOC capabilities internally, and what we found is it's extremely expensive, as most of you probably know. The tool investment alone and the ongoing maintenance associated with that is just an astronomical amount of money. There's certain threat intelligence feeds we need to maintain. We keep mentioning DevOps and our development staff. So how do we train and maintain that guidance from a security perspective so they can do secure coding practices? Extremely expensive. The salaries associated with a SOC team would be astronomical, and any good SOC does have a private facility. So, we opted to partner with AlertLogic. So, as part of our solution, we wanted to work with an industry leader who's focused on the same journey we are. If you look at AlertLogic's history, they've been a strong partner of AWS for a really long time. Their platforms have grown with the with the AWS offerings, and have really complemented them well. When I think about all the controls that are inside of AlertLogic, all the different options you have, and maybe we'll hear in the next presentation. It's almost impossible, in my opinion, to have your eyes on all those controls and options. So, AlertLogic, their Cloud Insight product, specifically gives me that visibility as security leader for RentACenter. Our solution uses AWS and AlertLogic products as they're offered in the marketplace. When we think about ease of consumption, ease of implementing these products, it doesn't have to be a professional services agreement to get some of these services put on the ground. It's about going in a marketplace and understanding the technology, but going in a marketplace and consuming those products in a very easy means. The thing I like the most about our journey is just a single pane of glass for security. Our environment has a bit of on-prem appliances through AlertLogic, as well as a large presence in AWS. So it's unrealistic in my mind to think about how we can manage that in two separate panes of glass, if you will. I need one portal, one pane of glass, one way to manage it, and I'm going to need help with that as well, right? So we work with AlertLogic through their ActiveWatch service, which is your analyst as a service, and they inform us 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 days a year of what's going on in our environment and how we're performing in the cloud. It's a fantastic service. For those of you who are not aware of the ActiveWatch service, it's a dedicated analyst to your environment. I highly suggest that you check out that service. We're also a Cloud Defender suite service or consumer, which is basically the entire AlertLogic stack. To date, we've analyzed about almost 400 terabytes of network traffic through the AlertLogic platform, which translates to about 570,000 events. And out of that, because of the smart analyzing of this data, we've only identified 220 actions. You know, if you think about your security posture, you want it to be actionable items. If you're looking at everything all the time, you're never going to get out from underneath of it. So when I think of another benefit of AlertLogic, it's how do we correlate these events into actionable items and make sure that we're paying attention to the things we need to. And then 220 out of almost 570,000, I think is an incredible number. And I thank AlertLogic for their support and knowing RentACenter, because there's when you think about that ActiveWatch service again, it's knowing your customer. It's knowing the customer and understanding their environment that gets you to that 220. So our secret sauce, I believe, is the people. You know, we've partnered with the AlertLogic security experts to mature our InfoSec team. They're an extension of our InfoSec team at this point. We also have had the AlertLogic experts in to talk to our DevOps team about, you know, how they're coding, how we can build automation into their processes. So again, it's that invisible security approach, and we've been very successful at it. I would encourage you to talk to AlertLogic about what they've done for us. Running a little over, but as you may be aware, you know, there's a shared responsibility model when you're working in AWS. And again, I mentioned the smaller team we have at RentACenter. AlertLogic helps us with our portion of that shared responsibility model for the security in approach. It's you know, we talk about the security in and the security of the cloud. You know, there is quite a bit of controls that you would need to pay attention to as an organization. You're gonna need help with that. So next, what's next for us? We're going to continue to maintain our security posture, our compliance posture. We're going to continue to expand our points of commerce and drive those transformational innovations from RentACenter perspective that we mentioned earlier. We're going to continue to build out our automation through an event-driven security program. Continue to mature our DevOps and DevSecOps culture. It's important goals for us to make sure that we're staying ahead of the market, ahead of the curve, and AlertLogic is helping us with that. If I had to make a few recommendations of where I would how I would approach this if I was just dipping my toes in the water here, I would say you're going to have to look for a security organization that is on the same journey you are. You know, if you're moving towards AWS, you're going to want to look for that security provider that has that seamless approach, that they're complementing those tools that are native inside AWS, but also bringing stronger value through the products and services they offer. I think that ties nicely into the second bullet we have here. You know, expertise in and on and around AWS. You know, I could think of no better organization than AlertLogic to partner with on securing AWS. And again, I mentioned the actionable security and security events, you know, best practices. They're absolutely your key to your success. You can't tackle the world. You need some way to correlate those and bring those down to a manageable level. And that's all I have from my side. I am happy to take questions, and we can do them through the webinar chat portal, or happy to get in contact with anyone that may have questions around what we've done from a RentACenter perspective after the event. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mike. So now we're just going to give you a slight overview of the different solutions that Mike was going to talk to me about that they're using to help provide security to their Amazon account. So just a little overview of AlertLogic at a glance. We've actually been in business almost 13 years now. We originally started working primarily with hosting providers around little over 7 years ago, made a strong pivot towards focusing heavily on AWS and AWS customers, which is really important because we started rebuilding our solution specifically for the platform rather than just trying to make an existing solution work in an AWS environment. We've done a lot of work to build from the ground up solutions that are specific to the AWS platform, that understand a lot of the differences from a networking perspective or identity perspective that exist when you're running on Amazon versus running on bare metal, for example, on-prem. We have thousands of workloads that we protect in AWS currently. We build our SaaS platform on AWS as well. We also are one of the competency partners for both infrastructure security as well as configuration and vulnerability management. We've been recognized by several different industry analysts as a leader in the space, and we have presence globally. At a very high level, just to give some more depth into what it is our managed service platform and our analytics platforms really do to help, for example, take that 566,000 events and give you the 220 actionable pieces of security incidents out of that. It really starts by building content and detection. And so we do that with several teams on our side. We have our own threat intelligence team, which is working with federal agencies, also working with open source feeds, also working with other threat intelligence teams across the industry. We also have our own research team that is building and signatures for vulnerabilities, identifying exploits and the payloads that helps us get quick actionable detection when new exploits or new vulnerabilities are found in the wild. We also recognize that signatures can't handle everything as the complexity of threats and the quantity of events is growing ever rapidly. We started a little over 2 years ago developing and maintaining our own machine learning models, specifically around web application attacks to help identify SQL injection, for example, or other types of attacks against web platforms. Then our content team takes all of that and also creates signatures. We also create log parsers, log signatures to identify potential threats or vulnerabilities, not just on the network packets themselves, but also within log data as well. Also, as part of our service, we help tune that for you, right? So, specifically, if you think about things like on layer 7 in the WAF space, one of the traditional challenges is keeping those rules up to date and actually working in a good way. Same with the signatures that you load for network detection or for log detection. If you don't have those tuned, you end up creating quite a bit of noise, or you might end up missing something if you don't have the right signature set. Our Security Operations Center helps tune those analytics and those rules. And ultimately, what comes out of that system is a whole large number of security events that get correlated down into security incidents. And the key part of that, because technology is really useful for helping you to identify potential threats and also helping to do some of the analytics around collecting and saying, these events are all associated with the same activity. But ultimately, in order to be accurate, you do at some point need humans to really take a second look at this. Machines can't do everything for us on this. And that's one of the key values that we provide in the back end, is that 24/7 Security Operations Center that is monitoring the outputs from all of the tools that we have deployed. And based on the review of those incidents when they get surfaced, within 15 minutes, the analyst will have an understanding of what has happened within that particular attack. They will provide evidence of whether or not it was successful. They'll evaluate the criticality. So the system might say maybe this was a high or a medium, and they might raise or lower that criticality based on their analysis of all of the associated events and the log data that goes with it. And then ultimately escalate that incident back to the customer. So that's the 220 actions that we effectively escalated back to RentACenter. And these will be in the form of an email for kind of low and medium detections, but we'll also do phone calls as well as emails for anything that we consider to be a high or a critical. So if there's an actual successful exploit, or if there's reason to believe that data might be exfiltrated, those are when we start also doing phone calls as well to make sure that we can get a threat analyst in touch with the customer's security team as quickly as possible and help provide them remediation advice on what it is we would suggest that you do from an action standpoint to help either mitigate that threat or to stop the attack from continuing. And one of the other things that we also do, in addition to identifying these attacks, is help with the Cloud Insight tool that Mike mentioned to highlight areas where you can improve security posture within your AWS environment. So that is a tool that only runs in AWS, and it's designed to do a set of configuration best practice checks plus vulnerability scanning of your instances. And really, you can almost consider a bad configuration to be almost a vulnerability, right? It's a vulnerability against how you've configured your infrastructure platform. So we'll look at things at the account level. There's a whole host of checks, or just a couple of them, right? Do you have your root account secured with a hardware MFA token? Are you using that account? Because it's not one that we'd recommend that you use. And if there is use of that account, it's something that you should be aware of and probably understand why that took place. Make sure that you've got tools from Amazon enabled that help improve your security posture. Things like CloudTrail, for example. We highly recommend that that's enabled across every single region, regardless of whether or not you have workloads running there. It's best to have that enabled globally, so that way if there is any changes later on, you can make sure that you're collecting those logs. And then understand how you're doing account separation, like how you're separating your workloads, your test and dev and production environments, whether or not you're using separate accounts or separate VPCs. There's several different models that you can look into to do that as well. The next kind of part of that is evaluating how you've configured services around IAM and making sure that you're enforcing least privilege. Some key things to look for there: make sure that you're not using a lot of the pre-built admin security policies, right? It's typically unlikely that people need access to every API call within a particular service. So using the admin policy is easy because everything works, but it generally doesn't conform to the principle of least privilege, because most likely that application or that user doesn't necessarily need access to every single API call available. Other thing to keep in mind too is, as you're using instance roles, which are a great way to allow your application instances to access Amazon APIs in a secure way that doesn't have long-lived keys, do make sure that you secure those instances really well, because those instances, if someone can access them, they inherit those privileges from an API perspective. And then we surface a lot of these as we call it exposures, right? So the other exposures you want to look at is how do you identify the assets within your environment? What are the boundaries that you have around them? Do you have a good tagging strategy that's consistent? Pretty much every asset within AWS now supports tagging. And especially as you start getting into larger environments, having a consistent and well-maintained tagging strategy is not only useful for developing IAM policies, but if you have to go and do any sort of incident response or go back and identify what was affected by a particular incident, understanding what's running on that instance, the tags can be very useful for that. Also, make sure that you're monitoring for new instances as they're launched, right? One of the great things about AWS is the ability to create and destroy infrastructure on the fly. But from a security perspective, as your applications are scaling up and scaling down, you need to monitor for those new instances and make sure you understand the security posture of those as well. As Mike was mentioning, we analyzed almost 350 terabytes of network data. And we're able to do that because we're also inspecting the network traffic within the environment itself. So not just looking at egress and ingress traffic at the VPC, but make sure that you can analyze network traffic within the VPC as well, including instances within the same subnet. Otherwise, you're creating blind spots to your network traffic visibility. Another visibility angle you want to make sure you get ahead of is encrypted traffic, right? Use of SSL or HTTPS transactions internally. You might need to use some different methods to make sure that you can get access to analyze that traffic that's encrypted over the wire. And then make sure, again, that you have good content to, when you're inspecting that traffic, the content and the signatures that are being used have to be relevant to the application in question. In addition to looking at the network data, log data is also a great source of not only detecting, but also if there is some sort of event, the log data can be critical in understanding the impact and understanding whether or not an attack was successful or not, but also what happened after and before that particular incident. So it's important that you're ingesting and collecting and storing logs, not just from the platform with things like CloudTrail or bucket access logs, but also logs that are on your instances. And when you do that, you need to make sure that you're collecting that logs with a way that you can identify it back to the instance that created it and then associated metadata, not just the IP address, for example. And then as you move up to stack, layer 7 also is where we're seeing a large number of attacks, especially if you have a public web presence. You do need to be able to inspect application traffic at layer 7 to identify attacks against your web apps, things like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, for example. We recommend using both not positive and negative rules. And what we mean by that is you create a set of rules and logic that define what is known bad. But over time, a good WAF can learn what is good and create new dynamic rules for that application that are looking for inputs to match what is now considered a known good or a positive rule versus just only looking for negative enforcement, things that match certain signatures or rules. And then, lastly, make sure that you understand the inventory of what you're running and where it's running. Being able to visualize your environment and understand how different components are connected together. Another couple good suggestions is make sure that you understand which images your developers are using within your organization. Maintain a list of known trusted AMIs that you want those developers to use. And then as you fix any sort of vulnerabilities, update those AMIs rather than trying to update the individual instances themselves. This is especially important if you're using services like autoscaling, where if you go and try to patch an instance, if autoscaling replaces that, you just replace it again with another vulnerable instance. In order to get this visibility, you can use APIs. We use the APIs initially for discovery, but after that, it's a lot faster to detect changes through things like CloudTrail, and use CloudTrail to understand what changes are happening within your environment versus continuously polling the API looking for new information. Vulnerabilities are another key part of this. When you look at preventing attacks versus just responding to them, there's a host of vulnerabilities that you need to be able to understand, detect, and remediate. First, you have the vulnerabilities that exist kind of in the code, especially if you're running applications that you're custom developed, or even applications that use frameworks that are commercial frameworks or off the shelf. So things like WordPress or Adobe Struts, for example. But also the code that your developers create on top of that. All of those are entry points for vulnerabilities. You also have configuration vulnerabilities, right? So things within your environment where you might not have configured your AWS environment in the most secure manner. And then there's kind of this other third angle, which is vulnerabilities that you inherit. And this is where if you think about third-party plugins or third-party code components that you're leveraging in your application. A change by a developer within that other third party could mean that you unknowingly inherit some vulnerability in your application. And if you're not scanning and looking for that, then that's something you might not be aware of until it's too late. So we really help customers, we call kind of doing a full stack coverage. We start down at the misconfiguration layer, right? Again, how is your Amazon environment configured? Is it conforming to best practices based on things like what Amazon puts forward? There's also a good set of controls from the CIS, Center for Internet Security, around account configuration as well. Then we kind of move up the stack and look at are any vulnerabilities within the operating systems or the application libraries within that environment, and then collecting and analyzing all of the network and log traffic off each instance, as well as kind of using that to detect lateral movement or privilege escalation or command and control traffic. And then lastly, on the website, right, watching for layer 7 traffic with things like a web application firewall, anomaly detection, and machine learning algorithms to identify malicious traffic up at the HTTP and HTTPS layer. When this all comes together, we end up with, again, what we call a security incident. This is kind of an example of how that timeline works. So if there is an incident where there's a SQL injection attack, first thing that you want to do, obviously, is understand whether or not that attack is something that has the possibility of being successful, right? And that kind of goes into that concept of weeding out a lot of noise. Especially if you have a web application, you are going to be hit with people probing and looking for vulnerabilities. if you don't have an understanding of what vulnerabilities you have, it makes it very difficult to understand how significant that probe or that reconnaissance is. I mean, somebody throwing a SQL injection attack or trying to use, for example, a known WordPress or Joomla vulnerability, if we know that that's been patched, right, we still want to escalate it, but it's probably only a medium versus a high, for example. So that's really where tying the things around vulnerabilities to analyzing the network and log traffic really tie together to help understand how important this particular event is. And then, like I mentioned before, log data can be very useful to do further analysis to see, again, whether or not that was successful, whether or not, if it was successful, what the impact was, what the adversary ended up doing. Again, then you need to watch that, right? So if this does go through, even if you believe that it was an attack against a patch vulnerability, or maybe you've gone and mitigated that, you still want to be on alert and constantly watching that. And this is something our SOC will provide after we open an incident. We don't just close it after we're done talking to you. They will do often further analysis and further watching on that traffic to make sure if there's any follow-up attacks. And it's important to do that too, because once they've found your website or they found your application, it's likely that that's not going to be a single drive-by incident, right? They might come back and try different vulnerabilities or different attack vectors down the road. And then also, lastly, you can use some firewalls or patching to help mitigate any of those attacks if they were successful. But then lastly, you also want to make sure that this is all documented and that you have an audit log and that you know what happened. You know why the security incident was either escalated or why it was closed out. So that way you have an audit trail of what happened, when it happened, and really who was involved in that. So just to give you an idea, too, from a packaging standpoint, Mike had mentioned he has our Cloud Defender suite, which includes a whole set of tools and products kind of in a bundle. So it's our Cloud Insight, which does the AWS exposure management. That's checking how your account is configured, giving you a topology map of all of the assets that you have running, as well as any instance-level vulnerabilities that are found within your environment. Cloud Insight also has an integration with Amazon GuardDuty. We are one of the launch partners for GuardDuty, and we'll take in any GuardDuty findings and enrich those with some additional security content that give you recommendations, as well as highlight any configuration changes that are recommended that are associated with any of the assets that were either part of that finding. So if someone's being attacked or if something was the source of an attack in a GuardDuty finding, we'll highlight any AWS configuration changes that should be made in order to help prevent that from happening in the future. The Threat Manager product, which is our network intrusion detection. So that's how we're capturing all of the network traffic within the VPC, allowing us to run signature and analytics against that network traffic. And then our Log Manager, which again collects all of the instance logs, CloudTrail logs, bucket access logs from S3, ELB logs, and pretty much any log that you want to create. If there's a log that you have that we don't already have a parser for, we also will work with you to help create that on our side. And then all of that is monitored by our 24/7 ActiveWatch team. This is what's making sure that it's both up and operational, but also analyzing the outputs from any of those tools and escalating the security incidents back to our customers. In addition to the Cloud Defender, we also have our ActiveWatch Premier, and that's that dedicated analyst that becomes essentially an extension of your security team, as well as a log review service that's specific to PCI, and then an inline auto-scaling WAF that you can use as well for additional layer 7 inspection. All right, so that brings us to the Q&A section. Again, if you have any questions, you can submit those in the panel, on the question panel in the GoToWebinar. In the event that we're not able to answer all the questions today, we will follow up with everyone who submitted a question via email to get you an answer just in case we run out of time before the top of the hour. All right. So let's see. It looks like we have some questions that have come in. So here's one I'll take. It says, how does Alert Logic compare to GuardDuty and Inspector? So we actually, like I mentioned just now, we actually integrate and we consume the findings from GuardDuty. If you look at the data source from GuardDuty, it's looking at flow logs, CloudTrail, and DNS logs. We're also, in addition with our threat manager, we're looking at the network packet payload themselves, in addition to those as well. So we take the findings from GuardDuty and we help enrich them with additional visibility that comes from the fact that we also can read the payloads, the full packet inspection, as well as the other instance log data sources as well. With Inspector's really designed around trying to identify insecure network traffic. So I think it's a great service from AWS. We also integrate with that as well, and any of the findings from Inspector can be shown in our Cloud Insight product as well. All right, let's see if we have any other ones here. So Mike, one that came in that someone said, have you had any security events and incidents since you were working with Logic? And what was the experience when you had those incidents?
That's a great question. So for us, I mentioned that we subscribe to the Active Watch service, and I can't say enough great things about that service. Of course we've had incidents. Luckily, knock on wood, none of them have been serious. But all the same, I want to understand what those incidents are. So we worked with our designated analysts who informed us of the risk, obviously, but also work directly inside our process. We have a very specific way that we work through any incident, no matter what the severity is, and how we identify it, and how we react thereafter is very important. So I guess the way I could sum it up is it's a seamless approach inside of our standard security operations, and AlertLogic is a part of it.
Perfect. Thanks, Mike. I did see a couple questions somewhat related to recording or getting a copy of the slides. Just so everyone is aware, yes, the webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be posted after we're done, and also you can see the copy of the slides there as well. So another question here came in. I'm currently running workloads in North Virginia and Ireland with the possibility of expanding into Germany. Would I be able to use AlertLogic in all 3 locations? And the answer to that is, of course, yes. We support all of the commercial regions within AWS, so you can run in any of the regions that Amazon has there. So another one from Mike, it says, how does AlertLogic contact you, and have you contact, or do you contact, or you have to contact them?
I think that ties nicely in with my previous answer. I mentioned the analyst as a service, or the Active Watch service. They're an extent. AlertLogic is an extension of our team. They're working with our security team via email. Of course, when we have an incident, there's a little more severity around it. We have our command tree where there's a certain expectations for each of those interactions. But for the most part, it's just as an extension of our team through email and phone. It's just like they're sitting next to us.
I think kind of on a follow on that, someone just said, of those 220 actions, how many did AlertLogic address, and how many were addressed by your staff?
That's a really good question. I would say the majority were actioned by AlertLogic. It was more of an awareness piece, and it also comes to learning our environment. Through all of these, we continue to mature what RentACenter looks like from a security perspective. So when you think about those incidents or those actions and how they were identified, they came along with questions about our environment. So I would say the majority, I believe, were actioned by AlertLogic, and then continue to make us better.
Perfect. One more for you, Mike. It says, you mentioned you have a DevOps and DevSecOps culture. How did AlertLogic help you continue to maintain that?
Another great question. Seems like all the good ones are coming from me. Yeah. So when you think about DevOps, it's around how can you partner with an organization. I'm sorry, when you think about DevOps and you think about security inside of that practice, it's how can you partner with that part of the organization to make sure it's automated and seamless? Because the last thing you want to do is stand in the way of progress from a development perspective. There's a lot of pressure in that area, and the pressure to perform quickly. So how AlertLogic helped us in that space was to work directly with our DevOps team on automation. Yeah, there was challenges at first. I'm not going to say that it was completely rosy, but some of the folks that are in this room and folks on the account, they really worked hard with that team to change a little bit of what they were doing, but also make some changes on the alert logic side as well. And that really impressed me. So understanding that there's better ways inside of their own products to do things, alert logic is open to talking about those things and, where they are on the roadmap with maybe some of those advancements. And through those activities alone, we've read a great partnership with our DevOps team. Also led us to more that DevSecOps culture that we mentioned, and that's evolving. I think that will be forever evolving, to be honest with you. But I'm happy to say, we were able to do that through this collaboration.
Awesome. This one goes to me. Do you offer an inline intrusion prevention IPS or only detection system? And how would you recommend blocking the intruders? So our network inspection is all IDS, and there's two kind of primary reasons for that. First and foremost, especially in AWS, if you're putting an inline device, you're going to affect scalability, and also because of the way the networking works, you're going to have some limitations as to what traffic you're going to be able to see. You can put an inline device at the VPC edge in order to inspect ingress and egress traffic there. However, putting an inline device between two instances within a VPC it's something that's not possible in order to do kind of traffic level inspection inside your Amazon deployment. So we've also taken the approach too that doing detection out of band is another. It gives us the ability to take our time, right? So one of the challenges with inline IPS is you have microseconds to make a decision, where we can use a lot larger signature set, but also the analytics to do better detection out of band. Right? Prevention is ideal, but detection is a must. So we really focus primarily on the network and the log level on detection. At the application layer with web applications, we do have an inline WAF that does blocking. So that can do active blocking. But importantly, because it's built for AWS, it deploys with a CloudFormation template. It sits sandwiched between Amazon ELBs. So that way it scales up and down just like the web application that you're using. And that's the other kind of key part to using any sort of inline device. If you are going to put something in line, like I mentioned, the edge is really where that works the best. But if you do place something there, you don't want to take a legacy device that isn't built for Amazon, that can't scale, and then put some scalability limits on your applications because of the security device that you've implemented. So we have another one here. Does Alert Logic integrate with any malware tools from other providers? Also, does Alert Logic provide AWS security assessments in the terms of accounts, tags, data classification, encryption for compliance reporting and archival? So as far as any malware tools, we do from a log perspective. So absolutely, we have log parsers and content log rules to kind of identify and create incidents for most of the major anti-malware tools that are out in the market today. As far as the security assessment in terms of accounts, tags, and data classification, so we do include all of the metadata associated with an asset when we do our security assessments, right? So if we tell you there's a vulnerability on a particular instance, we'll also give you the AMI that created it, the auto-scaling group if there was one, as well as all the instance level metadata. So there is quite a bit of that. I'm not sure 100% if that's what you were asking, though, but I think that's pretty close. And then I think we have time for maybe just one more question here before we wrap up. So we have one here. Do you have any demos for customers to try Alert Logic? We don't have like an online demo. However, we are in the AWS marketplace. We do have free tiers and free trials available. So with Cloud Insight, you get the first 30 days free. So that gets you the instance scanning as well as the Amazon account best practice checks. On our Threat Manager, we do offer a 5-node free tier. So that gets you the network IDS with the SOX services monitoring it. And you can use that for up to 5 instances for free. And then we also have our full Cloud Defender suite. So it's not really like a live demo you can go play around with, but you're very easy to get started leveraging the AWS marketplace to very quickly in a self-service fashion stand up for either no cost or for the first 30 days or no cost perpetually for up to 5 instances on Threat Manager in order to see how it would work in your environment. All right, I think that's all the time we have today. I want to thank Mike and Patrick for joining us on the webinar. And on that note, as a reminder, you will be receiving an email within the next 2 to 3 days with a link that will have these slides on SlideShare and also a recording of today's webinar. So I want to thank you all very much for attending. And if you have any other questions at all, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you very much.